You got into this because of your brother, right? He was Jeff. He was working in the business first before you?
No, it was Mike was my older brother was a programmer in the business. So
Okay.
he was the first person to get a job in the industry, basically.
Okay, so he got you into it.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of tinkering. I was tinkering at home with the computer, the ZX Spectrum, which was a UK computer, and I was playing around with that at around the same time he was kind of properly learning to program it, and I was tinkering around. I think he's 8 years older than me, so he was kind of finished uni. He'd come, more or less dropped out of uni, I think, to concentrate on computer programming, and you went straight into.
You were a teenager at the time?
Yeah, I was probably 14 or 15 or something when I was tinkering with these tunes, these early sound routines and things.
What made you want to do that? Why were you messing around with a computer like that? I mean, what brought you to?
I don't know. What brought me to?
Yeah, I mean,
the same. My brother Mike, he was the one that was really into it. I was kind of tinkering around with it at home just in my spare time, and it was a big deal. The computers back then were kind of brand new. It was a brand new thing to have a home computer. So it was pretty much everyone that was kind of that ilk. I guess a little nerdy, geek, kind of ilk, were kind of into computers, and we started playing around with them. And
you started making music on the Spectrum when you were 14?
Yeah, pretty much. I was kind of just interested in making sounds at the time. I was kind of, I did a music after school finished. I kind of, I left school early at 16, and I went straight to music college. So music was my thing.
So you did study music then?
Well, kind of. I mean, I did a year.
Uh-huh.
When I say I did a year, I did 6 months, to be honest. I got to Christmas, I think. So it wasn't even 6 months. It was probably more like 3 months, to be honest. And I kind of realised after that it wasn't really going to be my thing. It was kind of a preliminary course, very basic sort of course. We weren't doing anything particularly interesting. And in the background, I was already writing music for games, and I'd just started doing that. And I kind of knew that was probably what I wanted to do, rather than become a concert pianist, which is what I was at music college for.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
So Mike kind of helped you get the job at Software Creations?
Yeah, kind of. I actually got a job kind of before that. He was working for a local, very small company called Insight Software. And he did a few games for them that I provided sort of music for. But I was still at school at that point, I was kind of 15 when I was doing that. And so, when I got to the following year, around the same time when it was coming up for summer, and I pretty much dropped out of college at that point, he kind of said he was already working for Software Creations, and he sort of said to his boss, I know this guy, my brother, who is interested in writing music. Would you give him a go at this? So I kind of more or less walked into the job at Software Creations just through a lack of anybody else there to do it.
Do you think? Do you know why they were willing to sort of bring someone on who didn't really have that much experience writing music? There's
a very simple reason for that. Yeah. He was paying me peanuts for it. That's right. So I was kind of. He was quite happy to let me. I was, as I say, I was fresh out of school really, and I was kind of happy to earn anything really. I was happy to earn peanuts.
Okay, yeah, and then so you kind of helped bring Jeff into it then.
Yeah, I mean Jeff was. We'd both kind of done music together growing up, and we were in a band when I was 10, I think, and that kind of thing. He was already playing, but he'd done agriculture at university, and it was completely different thing he was into at that point. And he finished his university degree and realised that walking around the field with a wheel on a stick wasn't really his thing, which is part of what he was doing for a living at that point. And I said to him, you could probably do what I'm doing. It's, you could probably have a go at this. So he had a go at it.
Yeah.
and could do it. So yeah.
So on games where Jeff and you are credited, or you guys maybe worked as a team on this on those games, who was doing the majority of the composing? I would assume it was you doing the majority, or what?
For early on, I mean, on the Commodore 64, I think Jeff only did a few Commodore 64 things. He only did a few NES things as well. I can't remember particularly offhand what he did. I think he did a Tom and Jerry conversion or something.
Mm-hmm.
A few things, but yeah, I did most of it. But I was kind of, I came from a programming sort of background, so I was doing this. I was organising the samples, and later on for the SNES and sort of thing. So I was kind of the tech person, and Jeff was kind of just learning what I'd, said, this is how you use this program, this music driver or whatever.
But he ultimately became pretty involved with the composing?
Yeah, I mean, with the composing, certainly, yeah. I mean, towards the end, he was probably more prolific than I was, because I was just having a hard time by the end of Software Creations. I pretty much had enough by that point, so I was doing title tunes and a few in-game tunes, and then he was padding out the rest, basically.
Can I?
So
do you mind
how
if
it works.
What I was wondering if I could do is I'm going to just play some tracks that are from games that you both worked on, and then maybe you could tell me which one you did and which one he did. And I'm also kind of curious about what if you guys ever worked together on a track, or if you guys split them up when it came to this stuff. Yeah. But let me play. I'm just going to play a couple, more than a couple, a handful of tracks, and you can just tell me which one, if you did it or he did it. So here's one. This is from Silver Surfer. This is the first background music. This one's yours?
Yeah, it's all mine, this one.
Okay. And then I'm going to move on to another. What about this one?
Yeah, that's mine.
That's yours as well? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to... This is from Equinox here.
Yeah.
Do you know if this is yours or...
Oh, I can't remember. I think some of these Equinox ones, we kind of worked on them together, in the sense that what would happen usually is I'd start something, or he'd start something, and then we wouldn't know what to do with it next, and we'd take over each other's tunes, sort of thing, to try and come up with something new with it.
Okay.
I can't honestly remember now whether
maybe when the melody kicks in, it might trigger a memory.
Yeah.
I think it's about to come in here in a second here. Let's see. I'm gonna. I think it should be coming in soon here. Does this ring a bell at all?
Yeah, I think it's mine. Yeah. This one.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think it does ring a bell. Yeah. So I think that's mine.
Okay. Yeah. And then what about this one here?
Yeah. This one's mine.
This one's yours as well. Okay, interesting. Yeah,
this is bizarre, isn't it? You can see.
Oh, yeah, I have like more in-depth questions about Equinox and this track in particular a little later, actually. But yeah. All right, I'm gonna move on to some more. I'm kind of just curious to know which ones were yours and which ones were his. So far, it sounds like they're all kind of yours right now. But let's see what's going on with Plok here. So, how about let's see. What about
you went through it.
Yeah, I'm kind of just scrubbing through these.
The beach one.
Yeah, the beach one. Is this yours or?
Yeah, that was mine. That's mine. Yeah.
And what about this one?
That's mine.
This one's yours. Okay. Yeah. Now, how about let's see here. This is from Incredible Crash Dummies or Test Dummies.
Pretty sure this is Jeff's. This one.
This is Jeff. Okay,
maybe.
Interesting.
I don't know actually. I think you see. This is what I mean. We did merge on some of them, so yeah. I'm not sure. If any that sound like they start and then they deviate a lot that's usually someone's taken it. That's Jeff's, I think. I'm pretty sure that's Jeff's.
Okay, interesting. Okay. And then let me see here what I got here. I think just a couple more here. Let's see here. Indiana Jones. All right, we'll go to Indiana Jones. Oh, it's definitely Jones. Okay, wow.
Yeah, I can remember him writing it.
Actually, this one I can't. I don't think I'm going to be able to play this one. Do you remember the Indiana Jones soundtrack or Indiana the Last Crusade?
Well, he did. He did pretty much all of that, I think.
Oh, he did. Okay, wow. So let me see if I can play it on here. No, I can't play it on this one. Okay, so like I don't know how well you know the names of the soundtrack, but there's a track that is known as Berlin. I don't know how well you know the titles, the way that these get titled, Berlin, Coronado. But you think he did the majority of that?
He did. I remember him doing it. We were working in a tiny little office above a printer's at the time. So I kind of remember that we were. I can't remember what I was doing at the time. Probably nothing. I don't know. But I was sitting around. I'm pretty sure it was all him, Indiana Jones.
I don't know if you're able to answer this, but what are some defining differences between your brother's pieces and your pieces? I mean, do you think you have different styles or what?
Yeah, I think. I mean, he would say, I mean, and at the time he was basically very just, his attitude to it was just write anything and put it out, basically. That was always his attitude. And I was kind of always trying to sort of do something, push it and trying to do something different. And I kind of, towards the end, I was tying myself up in knots with that, to be honest, because, I didn't know what else to do. But he was kind of, I mean, towards the end, he was kind of, I think the boss would have said they would have quite happily got rid of me and kept Jeff, to be honest, because I was kind of, he was writing a lot more than I was.
Were you putting a lot more sort of care and sort of passion into the stuff you were making?
I was kind of, I mean, I was a perfectionist with it, I was kind of, I'm perfectionist. It's an overused word, really, but it's kind of. I think I was just trying to
make really good music.
Doing. Well, yeah, essentially, that's what I'm trying.
Where maybe Jeff was just like churning stuff out or something at a certain point, or
he kind of was. Yeah, I mean, he would by his own admission, that's what he was doing. He wasn't really any. He didn't have any great pride in what he was doing, particularly. I did. But,
well, you've said in other interviews that you don't think highly of your older work. I mean, is that a joke, or is that how true is that? I mean, are you? I mean, it sounds like you were proud of the stuff you did to some degree.
Well, the thing is, you see, it's this. I mean, two things going on there. I think basically, I'm saying from a perspective now. I don't know. You see, now it's different again, because I kind of think, these days people are kind of coming back to it fresh and seeing stuff there that I've kind of completely forgotten about now. But at the time, I was very keen on making it as really putting a lot into it, and I totally what's the word? I don't know. I got absorbed in what I was doing, and I was completely I suppose passionate about it then. But it was just, when you kind of, you put a lot into something, and then, there's an initial kind of well done, sort of thing from the boss or whoever. But, back then it was kind of, there was no real feedback from anyone, as to what I'd done, whether it was worth it. So I'd never got any sort of sense of, it was like writing blind, really, because I didn't really get any feedback from the outside world. On anything I was doing, So, it's not that I kind of. I suppose it's wrong to say I'm not sort of happy with what I did. It's just that it was in such what's the word? A different arena. I'm struggling for words now. It's the heat, I think. When you kind of, now, like you say, there is a sort of, there are people who kind of get what I was doing, and what game music was at the time.
So perhaps people's appreciation for it now is helping you appreciate it more now.
Definitely.
In between, you kind of had maybe kind of either forgotten about it a little bit or just sort of looked back on it and thought this is just something I did when I was younger and maybe didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe there's just a renewed appreciation because of everyone being, currently
Definitely,
very into it, I guess.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's kind of, if you, at the time it was kind of really sort of embarrassing, I have to say. It was kind of, I would obviously get into the music I was writing and do the best thing I could, but afterwards, there was no one there really that you could talk to even about it. It was kind of an embarrassing thing I did at work, and I couldn't even tell my, even quite close friends I wouldn't discuss it with, I was in a band.
You wouldn't want to share it with people though, look what I made, I did this.
No, not at all. It was really, no, not at all. It was an embarrassing thing I did, basically.
That's interesting, yeah.
That was how it was at the time, yeah. I was in a band with two other people. Both, one of them was a drummer, and one of them was actually also a graphic artist. So he was kind of in the industry, so he knew more about it. But the fact that I was writing game music had no bearing whatsoever on it. It was seen as a sort of embarrassing thing that we didn't talk about. I didn't.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Now, when you so this is kind of related to that is. Sometimes you adapted pre-existing video game music tracks for ports that your company did, for example, like Ghouls and Ghosts or Bionic Commando. Did you think that the music you were adapting, I know there was original tracks that you did for those games, but then some of it was you were adapting pieces that already existed for the original versions of the games.
Yeah.
Did you think that stuff was good, that you were porting, or did you think... it was a similar thing of how you thought of your own music at the time,
Not really. I think I actually had more respect for that stuff than the stuff I was doing, to be honest, because I was, there were certainly, there were parts of Ghouls and Ghosts and that kind of thing that I was really impressed with the music actually in that, but I didn't copy it absolutely. I think I think it's well known, isn't it, that I took the start of the tunes, usually the initial thing, and then thought, right, I'll do something else with this and take it somewhere. That was partly because the tune itself didn't last long enough. Right. So I had to, it just was a sort of a function of trying to make it last, longer than the arcade version.
So you did like other video game music, and at the time, or did you like other video game music composers, or did you keep up on that at all during this time?
I kind of listened. I mean, other people in the office would play me things now and again, Rob Hubbard or something, and I would listen to stuff. I was never. I can't say I was ever sort of. I've ever felt any real sense of sort of competition, because I kind of felt that we were all doing the same thing. I kind of. I was impressed with what other people were doing, but I didn't sort of try and copy anybody particularly.
Did you ever seek stuff out, though? Were you kind of a fan of that other stuff, of other video game music?
I wouldn't say a fan particularly. I was impressed by what they were doing. Yeah, I wasn't really listening to game music outside. No, I wasn't. It wasn't a thing that I was composing music, but I was listening to in quotes real music back then. At the same time I was going home listening to Jethro Tull, not game music.
Right. And was there, just out of curiosity, were there for some of the games that you did notice that you were impressed by? Were there any games in particular, any titles that you recall being impressed by?
I wouldn't remember the titles, unfortunately. I knew Rob Hubbard was kind of doing stuff because he was around. He was doing stuff before I even started writing for the C64. So I kind of knew of him. I knew a few others like Martin Galway, who was another composer. I wouldn't be able to pick out any particular tunes by anybody else, though. To be honest, I mean, I listened to what they were doing, basically.
When you first started doing game music, did you listen to other video game music, like Rob Hubbard stuff, to help you in the right direction, as far as how you were going to approach things?
I think right at the start, I did. There were people in the office that would say, you kind of educated me on that, and played me a few things. A guy called Mike Agar, I remember playing me stuff by Rob Hubbard and Martin Galway, and saying, yeah, I mean, just to say this is what's going on, sort of thing. But I didn't listen to a lot of it. I would have probably only listened to a couple of tunes, and just to get the idea of what they were doing. But I didn't. Again, I think
more of your influence is probably just non-video game music. 70. I mean, just based on your style, it sounds like you're influenced a lot by 70s music, 70s prog rock and hard rock.
Yeah.
Seems like a clear influence.
That was what it was about. Yeah.
Aside from the band Yes and maybe Genesis, is there what other bands did you like?
There was Jethro Tull at the time.
Yeah, right.
That I was listening to, which is obviously all over Ghouls and Ghosts, really, and that kind of thing. I think as well. I was listening to rock music. I was kind of into a lot of 70s, more 70s sort of rock. I did listen to Led Zepp quite a lot, but
I can hear that. Yeah,
yeah, Pink Floyd and those bands. I mean, they're all This is what happens if you grow up in Britain. It's all just you're soaked in these sort of bands.
Right. Did you like jazz fusion at all? Was that a thing for you?
I didn't know much about it, to be honest, at the time. I got more into it later, after I'd finished writing game music, I have to say. But not at the time. I just wasn't really aware of that. I kind of discovered Pat Metheny, who's a kind of jazz guitarist. Is it Metheny? I don't know. You can say it.
Metheny. Pat Metheny.
Metheny, yeah, that's the one. But I mean that was only later on. Really, at the time, I'm trying to
now, going back to some of these, the ports that were from Japanese games, like Ghouls and Ghosts and Bionic Commando. There's an obvious difference between Japanese and Western video game music. What do you? I mean, it's apparent to me, but I'm just from your perspective as a composer. What do you think that difference is?
Well, I mean, at the time, I remember listening to Mario and those NES titles, and certainly SNES titles as well, and they, sounded very kind of chippy to me. To me, it sounded like, I was obsessed with basically trying to make things not sound like it was coming out of the SNES.
Right.
Which goes back to that thing about kind of being embarrassed by it, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So when it got to the SNES, I was kind of trying to make it, trying to do things that didn't sound like they were coming out of a sound chip.
That's interesting. So perhaps there was more on the Japanese end of things. Maybe there's more of a notion of embracing the technical aspect of it, whereas with you or maybe Western composers in general, but there's more of a tendency to sort of try to emulate regular music or not non-video game music at least, or make it sound that's it. I mean, in retrospect, I think they were ahead of us. Basically, that's all. They were kind of they'd had a slightly longer culture of hearing that and being okay with it. Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think in the West we were still kind of uncomfortable with that sound, but
right.
It's the thing is, I mean, now it's same when my kids sort of play Mario, and then obviously it's all orchestrated these days and everything,
right?
But you can hear the influence in the musical influence as just goes from the very first NES game all the way through to the modern orchestral version of those, and the through lines stay consistent. There's still those recognizable melodies and things.
Right.
And I think if all that wouldn't apply to the stuff that I was doing, I don't think, the majority of it anyway, because outside of the context of that sound chip, I don't think it's got that longevity to it. And I think that's because I was, like I say, I was fighting the hardware. I was not thinking about the music primarily in a way. I was thinking about the sound, and making it sound good, and making it sound like something which wasn't game music.
Well, that kind of leads into what I was going to ask about the arpeggio effect, or what's known as the arpeggio effect, but this use of you're playing a lot of notes very close to each other so that they appear to sound like chords, right? I feel like that. It seems like Western composers use arpeggios a lot. well, Japanese composers don't at all. And maybe this ties into what you're saying about how using the arpeggio effect is this attempt to sound more like non-video game music, or to sound more right. I mean,
it's to provide harmony, isn't it? Essentially, you want kind of, ideally you wouldn't be doing the arpeggio. You'd be playing the chord. Essentially, that's all that's happening. That's certainly all that was happening for me. Given the restriction, I remember trying to write in, something more interesting than just a straight arpeggio. So I'd have a sort of, a kind of a very quick counter melody working in the background, which is basically just trying to provide a kind of more, a harmonic context for it. Either way, whether it's an arpeggio or it's something, a complex melody or something, you're right.
For that reason, do you think that's why Japanese composers weren't using the arpeggio effect as much? Is because they were just not really trying to sound as much like, rock music, or whatever, just regular music.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly right. I think they were comfortable with the sound, and they were quite happy to use, a two-channel melody and counter melody.
Right.
That was fine. But, it's kind of, that's what Bach managed to do for many, all of his output, and it's completely fine. I think it's just, like you say, it's purely an attitude thing,
Yeah. Where did you get the idea to use the arpeggio effect? Did you get that idea from hearing people like Rob Hubbard, or was that something you kind of figured out by yourself, or what? Yeah.
I think I must have heard Rob Hubbard do it, but it was... I'm trying to think back to when I first heard that. I think, I may well have heard that somewhere and thought, that's what I need to do.
So it wasn't something you kind of figured out when you were messing around with the computers as a teenager?
It's pretty obvious to do, it's a pretty sort of straightforward thing to do, really, to have a chord in the background rippling sort of thing. And I think it was because I didn't write the music driver for the Commodore 64, I sat with a programmer and we kind of went through it and went through what I might need. And, it might have been one of us suggested it, or he suggested it even, or something, said, you can have this wobble thing where you kind of alternate between 2 or 3 notes or 4 notes,
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what it, but like I say, a lot of those arpeggio type effects were kind of hard-coded. I actually wrote them in rather than, sticking 3 notes into an effect that rippled them for me, alternated between them.
Right.
So because I kind of wanted to make it sound a little bit different, a little bit, not just a machine,
do you know what this? Maybe this is related, but sometimes the melody will have a sort of pulsating sort of sound, and it's kind of it almost sounds like it's not quite like an arpeggio chord type thing, but it's something you don't hear in Japanese video game music. But here, I'll show you what I mean. This is let's see, how about this? It's coming up around here. I'm going to fast forward a little bit through this. All right, so this here. So you hear like kind of the melody sort of like there's a pulsating sound to it. What's going on there? Is that the same thing?
I think that was an effect. It's just alternating between octaves really quickly. That's all. That's all it's doing.
Okay.
So it's that kind of thing would have been an effect. You just kind of switch it on in the code.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So you're alternating between octaves.
That's I'm pretty sure that's all that was. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Was Sky Shark the first Nintendo game that you worked on?
No, I'm not sure actually. I didn't think it was, but I can't think what came first either. It was either that or we did something called Magic Johnson's Fast Break.
Yes, yeah.
Right. That I don't know. I think that could have been first. I don't know why I think that. Though I might be completely wrong.
I can't
remember.
I'm wondering if I have. Let me see if I have dates on those. I might not. I probably don't actually. But let's see. Oh yeah. Magic. No, I think. Let's see. Magic Johnson's Fast Break might have been out in '89 or '90, and I think that Sky Shark might have been before that, so it might have been first, but yeah. It seemed to me that Sky Shark might have been the first, but I wasn't sure, though. Yeah.
The reason I don't think it was first is because I remember working on those drums and things, and I hadn't perfected those. Whatever projects I did first, I know I hadn't sort of, by the time I got to Sky Shark, I'd sort of worked out how to do the drums properly.
I see, okay, yeah.
So, the thing is, I mean, what the release date is kind of, I wrote music just in a sort of buffer of when we knew we were developing the game, so kind of, it doesn't necessarily relate to the release date,
I see, okay, yeah, right. Did you, how different was it composing for the Nintendo as opposed to Commodore 64 and other computer stuff? Was that a difficult transition, or was that was it a lot of the same techniques and stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. I think once I kind of realised what you could do with waveforms and that kind of thing, it was more limited in the sense that there were certain sounds you could do on the 64 which you definitely couldn't do. You can do pulse width modulation thing, which was my favourite thing to use on the Commodore 64,
Yeah.
On the NES. So it was limited in that respect. But having said that, it had a character to it that I kind of quite enjoyed when I got into it, really. It had that sine wave sound which you could use for drums and bass, which is the characteristic sound of the NES.
Yeah.
And once I kind of got my head around how to mix drums and bass and use that channel and use the other two channels and what you could do with the different waveforms and things, I kind of started to enjoy using it, really, because it was still 3 channels. Either way, it was very comparable to the 64, really.
Right. The programming language wasn't too different, I guess, or.
Well, I wouldn't know. It was again, I didn't write the drivers for that. Someone else wrote the drivers.
Okay.
So yeah, they were very simple drivers, but yeah, I didn't write them.
So I'm going to play a track for you here, and this is from Pictionary.
Right.
This is known as Drawing Game. You probably didn't title it that, but so let's see. Now, do you ever listen to some of your old stuff and think, how did I do this? Do you like this track?
Yeah, I quite like. Do you know what? These days, when I look back, I actually like this kind of thing. At the time, felt a lot more kind of relaxed in the sense of it sounds more relaxed. The style is more relaxed, but to write it was a lot easier. And I kind of actually preferred. Listening back to this stuff now, I think this stuff is the stuff that survives better than some of the other stuff, the more complex stuff. Really.
And this happens to be this is probably maybe my number one favorite track of yours here.
Right.
And it just, there's a part here that I love so much. It's this right here coming up. How do you do that? I just here's what the reason why I asked that is it just sounds so organic, and it doesn't. It seems like you're really soloing on a guitar or something, or it doesn't feel like programmed music. I mean, it feels just so,
Well, the thing is, I mean, when
present,
Well, thank you. But it was, kind of maybe that's the benefit of trying to emulate real music, is that. I mean, I used to get accused of, in software creations, people used to sort of basically say, yet another tune, which is basically a bass line with a keyboard solo over the top, because that's essentially most of what I ended up doing.
Yeah.
But that's because, that's what I would be doing, at home, and so I was writing real music, I was kind of, you can hear the influences though, it was...
Did you compose on guitar or piano first, and then it was converted, or I mean, how did you do this? I mean, how did you write this music?
Well, it was the technique I used for writing music was the very, very primitive. Basically, I was going right back to when I used to code my own. Software, music drivers. I used to type in basically two numbers, which was a pitch and a duration. A duration in cycles, basically. So there was no pitch, it was basically just, I just got used to the fact that 100 was a certain pitch or whatever, and I just carried on doing that because I was used to doing that. So all the 64, all of that stuff, everything I did on the NES, SNES.
How did you get with just typing in numbers? I mean, how were you able to get this sort of organic feel as if someone's doing this actual solo? It's just a lot of practice, I guess, or just doing it repeatedly over and over again and getting,
No, I mean, I knew I could, I think towards the end, you more practice you got, I could more or less just type in a stream of numbers and know what it was going to sound like. Yeah, but that's only the same as writing music notation, isn't it? You know what it looks like, you know what it's going to sound like, so it was the same thing, really. Trial and error, but also, instant feedback was the main thing for me. So, if I typed something in, I could hit a button and hear it more or less instantaneously,
And to know how to solo like this, I mean, I guess you're also kind of influenced by, prog rock and stuff, or just rock music that you had been listening to as well.
I think that influence is more, I don't know, Quincy Jones, to be honest with you.
Oh, Quincy, yeah, no, totally, no, definitely.
Yeah. I was around that time. I think I discovered Stevie Wonder actually as well. So when I that was, you're hearing a sort of that kind of, you're talking about jazz fusion. I think that was what I was listening to at that time. That kind of thing. So it was just listening. I mean, if you play any kind of solo, you've got to know what you're aiming for. Your fingers generally don't just do it. Or rather, if they do, that's not a good solo, So, I was typing, just listening, hearing the solo in my head, and just converting it in, into numbers, basically.
You seem to have a sense of humor, and even about your music, at least just from interviews I've seen of yours or read of yours in the past. Yeah. You seem to have a little bit of a sense of humor of even about the music, right?
Yeah,
Did you have that sort of sense of humor back then when you were composing this music? And did you ever approach composing with a sense of humor in that? Were you ever kind of making jokes with the music, kind of sometimes?
Yeah, no, there's loads of that. Yeah, I mean, I was. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, really. I mean, I was kind of, there was the odd track where I kind of was more serious about it, but. I just have a hard time taking anything seriously, basically.
Right. Just out of curiosity, in this track, this Pictionary track, is there anything in here that you thought, oh, this is kind of funny if I do this? I mean, even in maybe the solo,
Well...
Or were you kind of more serious about this track?
It's not so much... It's more just having fun with it, I
mean, it sounds fun, I guess. That's,
yeah, I'm not necessarily... doing something deliberately for comedy effect or something,
Right.
But it's kind of, I'm certainly not taking it kind of, it's fun, music's meant to be fun, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
At least that's what I believe the point was, Right. Not that you would have been able to tell from all the prog rock I was listening to be honest, but, to me it was kind of, I can't do anything unless I'm kind of having fun with it, basically, so that was... I think I've just got a very low, what's the word? Boredom threshold, high boredom. No, is it low or low? So I kind of get bored quite easily, and you can hear that in the music, because even though I could write reasonably quickly with it, I would just get bored with it, and so you are listening to it over and over again. When I was writing, sort of thing, you have to listen to it over and over again. So. A lot of those changes that I would make were more or less just how do I keep this interesting for me to write,
You've mentioned in other interviews that you didn't get to play the game that you were composing music for, right?
Generally not, no.
And that your approach to composing was arbitrary, or that it didn't really have anything to do with the level, or you weren't being informed by the level really about how you were going to compose a track. Is that? I mean, so that's. I mean, well, I guess my question is did they tell you anything at all about the game? I mean, did they tell you what the level was going to look like, or even a level name or something like that, or?
Yeah, I would. I can't. No, well, yeah, kind of on some games. Yeah, I mean, yeah, where it was important that I did something specific. To be honest, more as I went along. So by the time I got to the SNES, the SNES was kind of, it became more important that I kind of did something that was appropriate to the game and not just my own thing. Because
Right.
yeah, I mean, Pictionary is a good example of me just, I literally wrote the music in complete isolation.
Uh-huh.
I knew it was for Pictionary, but
Okay, so
I
you
kind
knew
of
you
thought-
knew it was for Pictionary though, yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was for Pictionary, but I also knew that Pictionary is a drawing game, and
Yeah.
you can't write drawing music. Drawing music doesn't exist. That's just that's kind of. So I thought, well, I'm just gonna have to write some music. But the thing is, with that, there was no one breathing over my shoulder because that was a thing we did for an out of house, project sort of thing. So that was not. As far as I knew, anyway, that wasn't done in house. It was done for an external client.
Uh-huh.
And so I was basically, I just took the liberty of just doing whatever cropped into my,
And that's because basically the title of the game just didn't really strike you with any kind of particular feeling of a direction of how you should do it. So you just went off of just really whatever you wanted to do.
Pictionary doesn't strike me.
I mean, well, what about like games like, say Magic Johnson's Fast Break? I mean, did you think I want to write something that's kind of going to feel like basketball, or did you?
Well, I kind of had it was probably on the level of the overall mood. This is a kind of fun game, a kind of action game, so it's got to be a bit more upbeat. This is a more laid back game, so maybe do something a bit more laid back. This is, in the case of Solstice, it was a kind of puzzle game when there was it's a very kind of low action game, I guess, but
there's kind of a Renaissance fair. There's almost like kind of a Renaissance fair vibe to the music, or it's kind of like a. Well, I guess it sounds like prog rock, really, or Well, it sort of sounds like Jethro Tull, actually, but right? I mean, there's a that's medieval folk kind of prog rock situation going on, and
that was it. Yeah, it was kind of just because it was a kind of medieval-y sort of wizardy thing that was happening.
Right.
That was it, really. Yeah, that was the limit of my.
So I guess the music wasn't completely arbitrary unless you were at a loss when it came to, say, Pictionary, which you didn't really know what does drawing music sound like, but there was a little bit of an influence as far as the type of game that it was, or maybe the genre
kind
or
of,
something.
Yeah.
Or Silver Surfer, for example. What about that one? Is that just it's a comic book, and there's did that have? I mean, I guess I'm curious about how that influenced the music you hear in that game, or did it not?
I think. Yeah, a little bit. It was. I think with Silver Surfer, it was kind of, I knew that it was a comic book thing, and I knew it was kind of cheesy. And what I think I was going for with that is just a bit of a cheese undertone to it. Which I kind of revisited when I did the X-Men, Spider-Man and the X-Men.
Well, you definitely can hear a sort of. There's a kind of like a, I don't know how to describe it. I know what you mean. I can definitely hear that what you're saying in the X-Men soundtrack. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, did you? I mean, the thing is, some of the in-game music is a little bit more actually serious than it should have been given the game. But
well, no, but some of the tracks I feel like there's like wah pedals and stuff, and that sort of kind of
that kind of thing. Yeah,
funky kind of element to it.
That's right. I started out with that. Oh, actually, know what happened with that now? I'm just thinking. I remember this. It was I did start out with the full-on cheese and the wah-wah guitar and all that kind of stuff, and then I think the client didn't like it. I think what happened was that the whoever it was we were working for was saying, "Can we ease back on the kind of 70s, cheese, basically?"
Yeah.
And that was the thing I had, and kind of. So as soon as I kind of had to stop doing that, I was kind of at a loss, and I think that's where I kind of ended up with the rest of the game. It doesn't really fit with the cheese category,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's definitely some. I mean, I actually have questions for you about that particular soundtrack later. I'm really curious about some of the non-70s sounding tracks, but I'll get to that eventually. But the going back to the Nintendo Treasure Master. There's a track in Treasure Master. It's here. I'll just play the track actually. that has a. It sounds. I think it's the fourth stage, and it has like a. It sounds almost like an homage to Solstice.
This is Jeff's, actually. This is one of Jeff's.
Oh, this is Jeff's track. Oh, so Jeff worked on this?
Oh, well, actually. Maybe not.
To me, this sounds like it sounds like it's an homage to Solstice, or almost even like a track that wasn't used for Solstice or something.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It just sounds very Solstice-y. I was just wondering...
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. You might be right. It might have been something that was not used for Solstice.
Right here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just very...
I think it was, I've got... You might be right here. I was kind of... I think this may have been a Solstice thing and it wasn't used.
And then you just were, thought, okay, so that, because I was just wondering, is this like a tribute to Solstice? It sounds so similar to the Solstice soundtrack. This is the thing. So
I think it was. It might well be, because the tune we ended up with in the in-game tune for Solstice was kind of. I tried out a few things and they weren't really. It was just too over the top.
Was that a thing that you did ever? That you had tracks that you had composed for certain games, then you didn't use it for those games, then you ended up using for other games?
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, I did. It was kind of not. I wouldn't say often, but it was just occasionally I would get it so wrong, basically, that I would think, no, this doesn't work at all. I'll save it for something else. One of them was LED Storm on the 64 was originally the Ghouls and Ghosts title tune.
Oh, wow. Okay,
and
interesting.
It just didn't fit really, or rather, I probably would have fit, to be honest, but it was kind of one of those things that I thought didn't fit with the rest of the music that I ended up with, for Solstice. So
in Treasure Master, there's another track here. It's World 3 and 5. There's a thing you do. You do this in this track, and then you do it in. You do it in. I've noticed this. You do this in other stuff, but at one point, it fades into another sort of track, another piece in a way. Let's see where this happens here. Let's see. At a point it's going to fade out. It hasn't happened yet, but let's see.
Do you know what this is This sounds to me like something I've started and Jeff's.
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you hear that?
Yeah.
It's fading into another track here.
Yeah.
So what's up with? Okay, so this you're saying that is the fading happening because you both worked on it and one of you?
Yeah, that sounds to me like it's definitely Jeff now at this point.
Oh, that's really interesting. It doesn't sound like him necessarily, but I don't know what he sounds like really. But
I'm pretty sure that was a Jeff thing. The start was me because I remember doing that and thinking I don't know what to do with this next. Yeah, so but that happened quite a lot. So
here's the fade again.
Yes, definitely Jeff. This.
So it goes into it goes back into the original section here. So basically when it dissolves into the other track or the other piece, that's Jeff then.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
that's really interesting. I wonder if that was the case for some of the other times that you do. I've noticed that in some of the music. Is that
probably? Yeah, I mean, it did happen quite a lot because I was the master of starting something and not knowing what to do with it next. I've kind of got a reputation for doing that in general, actually, now.
Okay, well, I'm curious about... I'm going to ask about it later, but I'm curious about this one example, because it's a really interesting effect it has. Okay, so now you probably don't know the answer to this, but... I mean, I know you worked for the company that made it, but about Treasure Master, there was this... it was a contest, and the prizes were pretty
Yeah.
heavy. There was, I think, you could win $10,000, or
Really? At that time?
yeah, or a fantasy rock concert, or fantasy sports event, or a fantasy audio video room, or something like that. From what I'm able to gather. And do you happen to know? Again, you probably don't know the answer to this, but do you know if anyone won this contest?
No.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know who would know the answer to that, actually.
Right, exactly, yeah. So
Sorry.
the Thomas the Tank Engine, you worked on that soundtrack, right? Or was that mainly Jeff? Or
It was mainly Jeff, I think, actually. Thomas the Tank. Yeah, we kind of did a bit on it. Yeah, both of us. Are we talking which console now?
Super Nintendo. This is Super Nintendo, yeah.
Ah, right. No, I did the theme for it. That's right. I did the theme tune, and I think he did most of the in-game stuff. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
Which
the title theme was from was adapted from the
that's all it was. It was just a
whatever.
straight conversion. Yeah.
I guess so. He did everything else then besides the title theme.
Pretty much. I don't remember doing much on it. I do remember him writing it, and I probably chipped in a little bit now.
Did you happen to do this one here? Let's see this.
No, this is Jeff.
This is Jeff? Because there are elements to this track that sound like... They remind me of your tracks, at least from what I can gather.
Yeah.
But
well, this is sort of Genesis-esque, isn't it? Sort of background.
Well, there's
sequences and things.
There's a certain sound that comes in there's an echoey kind of sound that you kind of hear in the Nintendo stuff. That
I think I know it.
it's not here just yet. Oh, you know what I'm talking about, actually.
Yeah, I know this one. I'm wondering whether some of this stuff was taken from the actual show.
Oh, right. Okay. So
I think what this does, it was Jeff's thing on his own. Yeah, I don't think it was from the show.
So right here is where this sounds like a Follin sound here.
Yeah.
You know, those echoey things here.
Yeah.
But you still think that's all Jeff, though, probably.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh, it's Jeff.
I mean, he just stole all my techniques. I hope he doesn't listen to this. No, he's fine with it. He was. What's the word? We used to see what happened was the thing on the SNES was that I did all the sampling and all the creating all the sounds sort of thing, and he would do the music. So what happened with that was we knew what the title tune was, so I just basically assembled all the samples to make the title tune, and then all those samples were reused for all of the other tunes.
Yeah. So you didn't work on that track at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
Now, Equinox was this very ambient, new agey soundtrack, right? It's very different from your other work. Why did you approach it that way?
I think that was because we were working. It was the Pickford brothers that wrote Equinox, and they were kind of a little bit more hands-on than the other people in terms of what they wanted. They were like that with Plok as well. Actually, they knew, they had ideas about what they wanted. At the same time, they would always say, that they didn't know anything about music, so they just knew what worked and what didn't. So they were quite happy to give us free rein. But if something was kind of going off at a tangent and they didn't think was right, then they would tell us. And I think what happened with Equinox was that we knew that they wanted something that was more ambient, basically, something that kind of lasted longer and didn't loop. I think the thing they hated was looping tunes. So they said, "Can you do something that kind of just stretch it out and make it a lot longer?" And
well, that kind of brings me to my next question about that was the longest loops I've ever come across on a Super Nintendo game or in this game. And how were we able to fit all that much onto the cart or onto the the sample memory was sort of something like 128 meg, I think, wasn't it, for everything? It was tiny, man. Yeah, I mean, just with these lengths, how is that possible? Even
it's all tricks.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about the sort of singing sort of stuff? I don't know. I can't talk about
just some of it is just. Most of the tracks are just. There's. I feel like there's at least 6 minutes. They're 6 minutes long, maybe, or some of them.
Yeah.
Or longer than that, maybe 7 minutes. Yeah.
I kind of did a lot of they're all quite small loops still. If you listen, I think I just did a lot of fading in and out of loops and things just to try and make it sound more ambient than it really was.
Mm-hmm.
I my brainwave in that was creating echoes for the drips, because I remember you couldn't really do that kind of reverberated sound on the SNES, not without it sounding kind of mechanical. It was kind of just effectively the built-in delay was kind of a literal delay. It's just repeated the thing over and over again. So it sounded like a spring reverb or something. But I think what I did was I recorded some drips of water through a reverb box, and then just took out the start of the reverberation and looped that, and then played that, played the drip sound, sampled the drip in the SNES sort of thing, and then sampled that little tight loop of reverberation, just played that, faded it up quickly after the drip and faded it out again, so it sounded like the reverberation sort of sound,
Uh-huh.
So I kind of used that technique for some of the other samples as well. So yeah, it's tricks.
Tricks.
Yeah.
So Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge, so the same compositions are on both consoles. I know there was a Genesis port of this, and I know you didn't do you didn't deal with the Genesis port, but what do you think of the Genesis versus the Super Nintendo version of the music? I mean,
I never heard it.
Oh, you never even heard it? Okay, okay,
No.
Interesting. Yeah.
Never heard it. No, I didn't. It was, I don't know whether was it written before, or was it?
No. It was certainly written after. I mean, what I mean is, it was the same music. It's the same compositions from the Super Nintendo version, but it just ported to the Genesis. I was just curious about if you what you thought of the Genesis versions of your tracks from that, basically. Yeah.
Right, and you're talking about. I'm trying to think whether this was Matthew that did this. There's a guy that started at Software Creations around the time I left, called Matthew Cannon, and he did a lot of conversions of things, so maybe it was one of his. So I'm sorry I haven't heard it, no, but I'm sure it was very good. He was a very nice chap. So
now we're going to listen to the Wolverine level music from this game, and I just it's really interesting what happens here. It starts off with this sort of brass march kind of situation, and then for a brief moment, it dissolves or fades into this circusy kind of music, and then that fades out, and it becomes this other kind of soundtrack, this more actiony kind of soundtrack. So here I'll play it for you, and you'll see what I mean, and then or just to refresh your memory here. Let's see.
Oh yeah.
So this is the brassy.
This is all
march.
Jeff's, by the way.
Oh, this is all Jeff. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I
then,
think so. I'm trying to think if I contributed anything to this.
Well, it's going to change, and maybe you did contribute to the parts where it fades into something else. So, all right, I think it's gonna fade out. Coming up pretty soon here. Let's see. Right here, for just a.
Yeah, this is Jeff.
And then that goes away.
Yeah.
And then this comes in. So I guess I'm just thinking, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is all Jeff. So you can't really.
Yeah.
I guess because my question is what. I think it sounds really cool, but it's why the circusy theme for just a brief moment, it comes in for just a few seconds and then it's gone. And I think it's a really cool effect, but I just was curious about why.
Well, the thing is with Jeff is that, he sort of purports to be the most normal and least sort of nerdy out of the three of us brothers, but he's actually the mad one, basically. And he's just unaware of this. That's this problem, true sign of madness. That's all it is, just pure madness. Because he was, it was kind of boredom, and he would kind of just have a mad idea, basically, and think, that's what I'm going to do. Because,
to me, for somebody who is maybe churning stuff out more, just, and not maybe thinking about it as much as maybe you were, this just sounds so, kind of, seems like there's some artistic choice behind this, or something. You know?
That, or just
or he was maybe just messing around. But
possessed.
To me, it sounds like it almost sounds dreamlike. These fadings into things, and
I think that's
feels
what
like
he was going for, actually.
You're falling into this kind of dream or something like that. It's just very
that was.
Anyway,
this used to disturb me. I remember playing this at the time, and when that drum kicks in, it used to quite disturb me. I remember thinking, this is just actually properly mad, Jeff. This is kind of crazy stuff. This is a sign of issues.
Did you tell him that? Did you tell him that? You just say, "What's?"
Yeah.
And what did he say?
I said, "What's the deal?" Yeah.
What did he say?
He just didn't. He didn't. And I don't think he sort of understood why I was getting so freaked out by it. Because it properly freaked me out, that tune, because it was kind of.
It is kind of a night. It's like you kind of go into a nightmare, which is cool. I think.
It has a nightmare quality to it.
Yeah.
A genuine one.
I know it's like the level is sort of toy and clown theme, which is why this march is appropriate. But that moment of the circus music is just so interesting to me, and then how it goes into this other track, it's just so it's so weird. I like it.
It was always that. Yeah, it was the bit where the drums kick. The kind of drum bit kicks in later on after the fairground.
Right.
That used to freak me out.
Yeah.
It was just. There's a sort of violence to it, isn't there?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So fading into different tracks within the same level, that's just something. And you do that. And so that's really was just.
Well, Jeff used to do.
It was
that,
Jeff. Jeff is the person who's doing these fadings, basically.
I think if you hear a fade between one thing and the other, it's definitely Jeff. I think what I tended to do was to try and find a kind of through line, so I'd kind of try and link the parts up a little bit more than that. I didn't just abruptly change, although I did do a little bit of that, I guess, but.
Now there's kind of like some rock in this game a little bit, and then there's also this kind of techno-y kind of stuff as well. Like there's some, or even with Plok as well. There's like almost like sometimes even trip hop style stuff. Do you were you listening to that kind of stuff as well? I mean, was that where's that electronic music element coming in from?
Yeah, I was aware of it. I wouldn't say I was kind of that was my major influence or anything. But it's kind of I've always been a bit of a magpie in that respect. I just sort of hear something and steal it. Essentially. Yeah, definitely. It was kind of just anything that sounded interesting. I mean, really anything that was on the radio. If it sort of struck me as something I could steal, basically, I'd steal it and just use it.
Sure, yeah. Now, what's going on here? Take a listen to this. There's a breathing noise that's going to come in a little bit here. I don't know if this is a Jeff track or if it's you, and to me this sounds like the designer. They were saying this is one that I imagine they said, "Oh, maybe enough with the wah stuff and maybe something more serious," but there's going to be a breathing noise that comes in a second. Here it is. You hear the breathing?
I'm thinking this is Jeff, again.
That breathing noise also. Let's see. So there's breathing here, and then it's also in. It's in the Equinox track as well. What do you? Okay, so you. This is a Jeff track then, right?
I'm pretty sure this is a Jeff track. Yeah.
This one for. Let's see. Let me go back to Equinox here. So the breathing here, let's see.
Yeah, that was mine.
This is yours. Okay, what's up with the breathing? I mean, how do I think it's really interesting and cool. I like it. Where did you come up with the breathing? I mean, how did you think to start using breathing noises? And I guess you're both using breathing noises. If Jeff is using it in that Storm track, and then you hear it here in Quagmire. This is called Quagmire, and for Equinox. What is this breathing?
I don't know. I think some of the sounds were kind of like a lot of this music is kind of it's engineered backwards in a way, because you kind of. I would do something, I'd record something or sample it and it would work, and sometimes it wouldn't work, so I'd have to ditch it, And I think I just sampled something that was...
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, whose
like
breath
breathing,
is that?
yeah.
Or did you sample somebody breathing?
I don't know.
Is it your breath?
It could be. I don't know. I recorded my girlfriend once doing that. I remember that.
Oh, really? Breathing?
Yeah.
So this could be possibly your girlfriend's, at the time, breath.
It slowed down or something.
Yeah.
Probably, because,
that's funny.
It might well be. Yeah.
That's interesting. And but you just thought, this would be an interesting atmospheric thing I could just integrate into this track, I guess.
I think so, yeah. I think I can't remember. I can't bring to mind where that came from, but I'm sure it would have been kind of, I'd heard it somewhere used in something, and I kind of thought that was interesting. Or maybe not. Maybe it just occurred to me to have breathing in songs. I don't know.
And did you... Oh, yeah, you hear it in Plok as well. I believe it's in Plok during a boss or something. But and so that breath might be the same breath used in all these these maybe 3 games, and they all may be your girlfriend.
Yeah. Maybe.
That's really fun to know, if that's the case,
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but how come the Incredible Crash Dummies or Test Dummies has more music on the Game Boy version than on the Nintendo version?
I don't know. I can't answer that. And also, I think that most of that was Jeff as well, the Crash Boy, all that stuff. What it was called, Incredible Crash Dummies. I think it might have been a collaboration sort of thing of doing things. You did have to convert, from what I can remember, the Game Boy wasn't, it was very similar to the NES, but there were differences. It had stereo for a start, I think.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and there were some other kind of little chip differences. You could make slightly different sounds with it. So you couldn't do a straight conversion. You had to fiddle with it a little bit, I think. So it might have been just a case of running out of time, to do that. So I don't know. I have no idea.
No, I'm going to there's a couple tracks I wanted to play for you that they don't sound like you. You're credited, at least on the internet, you're credited with these tracks, but they don't sound like your style. I'm curious if they are you or not, but here's a couple. This is from WWF Warzone for the Game Boy. Is this you?
I doubt it.
No, it doesn't sound like you.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, and then what about this track here? Doesn't really sound like you, but...
Well, I'm wondering whether... I don't know. It's sort of a little bit familiar, but I don't know. I don't remember doing it, so it could have been a conversion or something from something else. I don't know. I can't help you, sorry. I don't know.
That's all right, yeah.
It was towards the end of Suffolk Creations, I was sort of mentally glazing over, I was losing the will to live, I think.
What about this one right here? This is from Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball, which lists a lot of different composers. I imagine this is just everybody who was there. This isn't you, right?
Well, those are my samples.
They're your sounds.
Yeah, I can recognize the samples. What is this from, sorry?
This is Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball?
Oh, I tell you what this is. This is one of Matthew's. I was telling you about Matthew Cannon. Who started at Suffolk Christian. Yeah, as I was leaving. I'm pretty sure he would have done that using my samples, sort of thing. Yeah, so those are your samples, but not your not composition. Music, Okay, so Time Trax, right? This is the only Genesis title that you composed music for. It was a canceled game as well. So, is it true that you programmed this in assembly? Yeah, I did it the same way I did everything else, which was I was still, even on the, as I say, right up until the SNES. The Genesis was the last thing I did, but it was just coded as in terms of I would type into the assembler basically that was also had the code for the music driver, and so I just type in pairs of numbers again and control codes to switch various things on. Did you always program in assembly? Yeah. Okay, so even for everything else, you were doing it in assembly. All chip stuff, yeah, I did in assembly, yeah.
Was working with the Genesis pretty different? I mean, was it different from the Super Nintendo in a good or a bad way, or a challenging way? Or what?
It was definitely. To be honest, it was probably the best console, the most enjoyable console.
Really?
Yeah, and I kind of was always annoyed that I didn't get a chance to, because it didn't happen at Software Creations. You see, we didn't develop for the Genesis.
Right. It was Malibu, right?
Yeah. So it was, as soon as we got to Malibu and we did that, it was kind of, wow, I didn't realise this existed, basically, and you can do this, and it was already sort of on the way out at that point anyway.
Why did you like it more? What did you like about the Genesis?
It just from my kind of the kind of things I like to do with musically, it was just wide open to do that kind of stuff. Specifically, I remember because of the FM modulation, you basically had. I'm trying to remember this now if this was correct. You had four. Each channel had four kind of parameters. There's a name for them. I can't think what they're called. The kind of, it's FM modulation, basically. The DX7, if you remember that old keyboard, used to have the same.
It's an operator.
Operators, right? Yeah, that's the word. And yeah, that was, I think, basically because it had the four operators, you could merge those in different ways. You could assign them different. Whatever it was, parameters that made them sound different, basically. And so they interacted with each other differently. So you could get those metallic sounds, and you could get those very distorted sort of sounds.
You like the range of sounds that you could get out of the Genesis.
Yeah,
right.
And specifically, what I discovered with it is that you could switch them all to sine waves, and you basically had four notes that you could play independently. Mm-hmm. So I had one channel that could play 4-note chords, essentially. So I was kind of in heaven as far as I was concerned. I could use two channels and create just multi, do whatever I liked, sort of thing. So I could have a separate drums, separate bass, separate chords channel doing something, and I could have a separate melody. And I was still had a few channels left for sound effects, so it was kind of. I just thought it was the best system.
So you feel like you had more options, I guess, or there's more for you to work with, even though
it also sounded nicer,
Right. Well, it's interesting you say that because you mentioned before how you are, kind of you're striving to sound more like non-video game music, yet there's more of a synthy sound with the Genesis as opposed to the Super Nintendo, which can have actual sampled instruments, in it. What's
I
up?
Guess so, yeah.
What's up with that? Yeah.
But I think the SNES was kind of fun to play with, at the time, because we hadn't used. It's the first time we'd used sort of samples in a console. I'd sort of played around with the Amiga, but I always hated the Amiga. We had, I don't know if you ever had the Amiga. It was kind of terrible. It was 4 channels of samples, but just awful. It just sounded rubbish, basically. So it's certainly in the memory restriction we had on it. So the SNES was the first good sounding sample console. Sample based console. But I always sort of preferred to work on the 64 and the SNES anyway because of those limitations. And I think the Genesis just had it had the same sort of limited limitations to it, basically, but it had a really nice sort of analog sound to it. Mm-hmm. And so I just preferred that to the SNES. Yeah.
So you liked the simplicity, or I think you've mentioned this too before, but you like this how simple it was during, to work with less, or that it was easier to work with less.
Yeah.
And so, did that turn you off about working with the? Well, okay, so like say during the 8-bit era, you're working with less. Yeah. Did it turn you off to working with the 16-bit stuff or at all? I mean, it was, or it was still there was still that limitation, I guess you mentioned. But I guess is that why eventually you left composing video game music is because of the systems becoming more. Yeah. I don't know, just having more to work with, I guess, or something like that.
I think so, because once you're into kind of, CD streaming music, basically, you're not, the only limitation is which instruments you can play on your budget, which is not apparent to anybody else apart from you, unfortunately. If you're writing for, the Genesis or something, it's quite apparent to people who are listening to that what the limitation is and what sound they expect from it, what's the range of sounds they expect from that. But of course, once you're into you're competing against someone that's got a $60,000 budget or something on something, you know, unless you've got the same budget and you're working at the same level, then you're just, you know, never going to be able to achieve anything that compares with that, you know. And so it just became completely disillusioning, to be honest.
It's interesting. There's kind of a dichotomy almost. It's just that there's this tendency to sound more like, you know, regular music, which has no limit to it, you know, and yet there's also this I don't know, it seems like there's an affinity towards working with the limitations within, you know, and
I mean, it's the old thing, you know, what is the old phrase? Limitation. Is it limitations are the mother of necessity? Oh, necessity is the mother of invention. That's the one, isn't it? That's the phrase. Which is, you know, nothing happens, you know, certainly for me, I flail around unless I've got limitations, basically. You know, unless I've got a kind of clear something setting the parameters that I can kind of solve, you know, because to me it's all about, even writing music is kind of problem solving in a way, you know, you're kind of trying to come up with something within a set of limitations. You're trying to solve the problem of creating a tune or, you know, whatever it is, you know, to me, I just need that limitation.
Right.
I need.
It makes it maybe. Yeah. I mean, I guess you're a problem solver.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I kind of approach everything. Yeah. I kind of that my, you know, I mean, I created a game quite recently, and I remember thinking, that's the only reason I did that was because it came out of quite a while ago, thinking if I was going to have you know, a video based, as in a live action video game, how do you make live action video, you know, not repetitive, and how do you make that an interesting game at the same time? You know, this was kind of going back years before I actually made it with Jeff, actually, and I remember thinking then, how do you solve this problem? And that was that's the kind of thing that obsesses me, you know, for no reason whatsoever. I just kind of get a problem into my head and think, how can I solve that problem? So that's what drives me, you know. And it was the same with music, and so given when said you have no limitations on this,
right,
do whatever you like,
there's no problem.
Kind of just flail around. Right.
That's
no problem to solve. Yeah, exactly.
There's no challenge. Okay, Rob, I think Rob, you have a question.
Yes. Well, you had answered a system that you really enjoyed composing. Your favorite was the Sega Genesis, yes?
Yes. Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it was the last thing I worked on, and it was kind of, in a way, I only wrote that one, I only did that one project on it. So, you know, it may have been that if I had to do 5 projects on it or something, I would be saying, no, it's the worst system to work on, you know, or something. But I don't think so. I think it just had that. To me, it was, you know, it had the right level of flexibility and range, but the limitation there as well, you know. I think that with the other consoles, they were kind of either too limited or they were limited in kind of a strange way. You know, the SNES was a funny limitation because even though you could play back samples, you had no memory for them, you know.
Brent.
I was, you know, so it was kind of, and I wasn't given the option. I think, you know, it could have been done where you could have given some of the main memory over to the sound and, you know, transferred that sound over when you needed it at the start of a level or something, you know, but I didn't get that luxury, you know. I just had to cram everything into that one chip. Yeah.
Hey, Brent.
Yes.
I guess in a way you could say Genesis does what Nintendo don't.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay. Thinking about all of the soundtracks that you composed during that era, what's the standout off the top of your head?
Off the top, I don't know, because I tell you the stuff that I actually listened to, and I would think, I quite like that, because I don't think that about most of it, to be honest. Now, and it was the time track stuff. I think there was a couple of in-game, tracks that were kind of just mellow funk. I think, maybe that's just more in tune with my sort of current sensibilities or something. I don't know. But yeah, I listen back to the kind of stuff that I think a lot of people say, that Solstice main theme, you know, is kind of noticeable, track for its kind of length and everything. But I don't know. It's not. I don't know. I think I kind of gravitate towards the more mellow things now. So.
Yes.
So your top track. If you were like most proud of a track, it's from Time Trax.
Yeah.
And perhaps. I mean, the mission briefing track is got that mellow.
That one. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that was probably one of my favourite ones. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Just because it's sort of mellow and it's got a bit of an atmosphere to it. That's about it.
Do your kids like your music? Have they listened to your music at all? The kids?
The only thing that they've ever commented on was the Plok title tune.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Plok.
Yeah.
How did they even come across that? And do you show this stuff to them or what?
No, I think they found it online. Actually, he's an avid YouTube watcher. My oldest kid, so he found it somewhere.
Do your kids know? Sometimes. Do your kids know how renowned you are as a video game composer?
Oh, I don't think that means anything to them, to be honest. I think they know that I do interviews at the moment. They kind of know that I used to do this, and they kind of think, that's cool. But it's so divorced in a way from what they're into at the moment.
What about your wife?
They do listen to.
Is your wife into the stuff you've worked on in the past? Or?
No. No.
Have you shared it with her at all? Or?
Not really. No, I don't think she cares. I don't have a very supportive family.
Okay, we're almost just about done here. I just I thought it maybe be kind of neat to if I just played a track and you could just do commentary on it, and just and then as the last thing, and then after that I'll just see if there's stuff you want to promote or anything. But I'm just gonna play this track from Plok. It's the Beats track. And I don't know. You can just talk about it if you want to. I don't know. Maybe we'll use this or maybe we won't.
Well, I can tell you what I thieved if you like.
Oh yeah. Well, let's see here. I'm just scrubbing through this here.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what I thieved for this. I'm not sure I did thieve anything apart from the time signature. It's a bit Genesis, this, isn't it?
Oh, sure, yeah.
The next bit, the transition into the next bit is not this bit because there's a bit of a sort of theremin type of thing going on.
Yeah,
here, yeah. This was again ripped off from Genesis. All my early stuff was Genesis basically. Because it was kind of it was that mini moog sound I wanted.
I love this part.
And this complete shift here. This is Stevie Wonder now, basically. This is Do I Do.
Stevie Wonder, what era, what album? Like Square Circle?
It's specifically Do I Do from
Do I Do,
which is I think a Musicarium, sort of one of those tracks that was only on Musicarium.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this is just straight thievery.
So Genesis is Stevie Wonder. Anything else you want to comment on about this track?
Well, I think from now on it kind of goes into... I think I've done that. This is a case of getting bored with something and moving on and doing something else. I don't know where this is from now. I don't think this is particularly theft. I think this is just something that... Oh, it's a bit Queen, isn't it? This is where it goes a bit Queen. Yeah, because it's... there's a guitar riff here which is straight from Brighton Rock. Kind of... I don't know, there's a bit in Brighton Rock where he kind of just solos and there's a delay. Yeah, diverse. Deviant, maybe. Yeah, you see, that was a kind of... Let's do a kind of guitar thing, you know. I'm sure that's just straight from Queen.
Are you proud of that track? This track?
Oh, it's kind of... I kind of... You know, I don't know about pride, but I don't know if I'm proud of anything, to be honest. But, yeah, it's kind of...
Well, this is one of my favorites of yours. I think Rob too, actually.
I think, you know what, I kind of always like the kind of big major sevens and, you know, the chord sort of thing. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed about writing for the SNES, is that I could have those big multi-chord things happening, you know, the sort of more major sevens and things.
Yeah.
Which I was a big fan of.
Right.
That was one of my bugbears, to be honest, though, through all of that, because I think what I was listening to at the time was kind of very harmonic. You know, it was very kind of not. I wasn't listening to electronic music at all, because it was very monotonous, if you know what I mean. Not just monotonous, but kind of monotone. You know, there was to it harmonically. It didn't sound very rich harmonically to me. So I wasn't a big fan, but certainly I got into. I remember being into Stevie quite a lot at that time. Yeah. So.
So Rob, did you have anything else you wanted to ask Rob or anything? Or?
No. I think that was a fantastic interview. It was a real honor, real treat to hear all the insights.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I mean,
is there anything you'd like to promote or mention, or things you're?
What I'm working on? Not really. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm working on another game actually that started out for my kids, and it's just morphed into something like it's kind of turned into this big monster now that she's kind of threatening to just. I don't know whether I'm even going to finish it, so I'm not sure I can promote it. But it was started out as a horror game, an FMV horror game, basically, that I'm kind of been working on. And it's kind of still that, I guess. So it's, I was aiming to get this out for Halloween, but I'm just going to miss it altogether. And I missed it. I was aiming to get it out last Halloween. That's how long I've been doing it for.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And it's just, it's driving me absolutely nuts now, to be honest, because I just feel like I'm not making any headway on it at all. Yeah, if I do that, that's what I'll be doing. But I'm writing the music for it, but there's hardly any music in it. It's more kind of ambient sounds and things. So,
as retro gaming has sort of become particularly popular these days, and a lot of modern games are harkening back to older aesthetics, are you interested in doing music again and doing it in that limited way that you kind of liked?
Well, I don't know, because it would be the problem is that I was so dependent on the specific music drivers that I used. I'm not sure how I'd fare with using a kind of the existing ones that I'm sure I could probably work on the Genesis. I'm sure there's a tracker for the Genesis, but I wouldn't know. I don't know if I'd be comfortable using it. To be honest, that would be the sticking point. That and having absolutely zero time to do anything at all at the moment. But I mean, if I got sort of some free time, I probably would have a go at doing something. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time and to talk to us. And it is truly an honor. We're big fans, and and I mean,
cheers.
I mean, we're not just big fans. You're just definitely one of the. I don't know how much you know this, but you're very highly regarded in the video game music world and beyond.
Well, apparently, the thing is, people say this, and I'm not aware of it particularly. No, but it's nice. It's nice if people are aware of it now. They say. I mean, I wrote it in a vacuum. And I had no feedback whatsoever at the time. So, it's nice. It's nice to think that this many years later, people are still listening to it. So yeah.
Well, thanks very much for your insight.
No problem. It's my pleasure. Actually, it was good fun.